Alright, my friends, welcome back to All Cars. I am John, and it is time for another retro review reaction. This week it is the 2000 Oldsmobile Alero 5-speed, and this one really caught my eye. I just finished up the big Oldsmobile history video that I did, and I've got a lot of fond memories about Oldsmobile. I came really close to buying an ACwJ, and probably going to go back and do the Motorweek review of the ACwJ, but the Alero, this 2000, this would have been right when they were, well, announced that they were closing down the entire division. So I want to see what, at the very end there, what the Alero actually looked like from Motorweek's perspective. I have a very high opinion of it myself. I know it's still based on the Pontiac and Buicks and everything else, like the Skylark, I believe it was, but I really like this car. Really like this car, as I recall. So it'd be cool to see, take a little trip back memory lane, what 22-year-old Oldsmobile looked like, and if my memory's playing tricks on me.
Motorweek is made possible by Tire Rack.
When we first tested Oldsmobile's Alero coupe and sedan 18 months ago, we praised its tight, nimble handling, its punchy 4- and 6-cylinder power plants, and its very competitive pricing. But at the time, a 4-speed automatic was the only transmission, and we felt that a manual would go a long way in enhancing the Alero's sporting nature. Well, apparently so did Oldsmobile. Now the Alero comes standard with a Getrag 5-speed manual. So now that we've gotten our wish, were we right?
So right up front, I think this is a sharp looking car. I really do. I don't overwhelmingly love the platform it's based on and the platform sharing that brought Pontiac and Oldsmobile and Buick and Chevy to this place. But I think here at the end that Oldsmobile was doing a lot right in terms of trying to differentiate themselves. And the problem is, were they affordable, were they sporty, were they premium, near luxury? They just, nobody really knew. They didn't fit into the corporate structure is what I've said. But I think this looks sharp. I really do. From just a looks perspective, I would rather have this than any of the Japanese vehicles of the time. I like the headlights. I like it. It's almost got just a little bit of eagle talon in the front of it to me. But I think this is a sharp looking car.
Of course we were. We know about these kinds of things, right? But seriously, all inflated sentiments of self-importance aside, we will admit to great fun being had ringing out the power band in the 2000 Oldsmobile Alero with the aid of its newly acquired 5-speed manual transmission. But as is usually the case when you get what you wish for, you find out you want more. So while we feel the match with a 4-cylinder is fine for starters, a V6 would be better. Still, the Alero's twin-cam 16-valve 2.4-liter 4 with 150 horsepower and 155 pound-feet of torque is nearly as large and powerful as the V6s that some import brand competitors brandish.
The 2.4, 150 horsepower, that's not bad. I mean, it's just, you know, not many years before this, V8s were making 170, so that's pretty stinking good. They didn't say it. Is this still a quad 4 or is it a offshoot of the quad 4? I'd have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head. I think it is, but I really don't know. But I like this engine. I remember driving these engines. I like this engine. Don't know that I think it's more reliable than the Japanese ones, of course, but you know, on the one hand it's more powerful, torquey, but it's just another example to me at the time, putting myself back then, another example of how GM had to use a bigger engine to get the same kind of results that the Japanese could do with a smaller engine by focusing on a lighter body and just all the nimbleness that kind of came with it. That's an impression, that's an opinion, but looking back, I kind of dig this engine, and you know, not unhappy with that power by any stretch.
And the Alero is a lot less money. It pulled us to 60 in 8.3 seconds, trimming 0.3 off a run we clocked early in the year when testing the 4-cylinder, 4-speed automatic Alero. The quarter mile was conquered in 16.2 seconds at 87 miles per hour. We like the way the torquey big-bore 4-banger pulls strongly and consistently throughout the power band. The gearing of the Getrag 5-speed seems well matched. If only a little more effort could be made taking some of the rubbery feel out of the cable shift linkage. We have less restrained praise when it comes to the Alero's crisp handling characteristics, as the geometry of the McPherson strut A-arm front and tri-link rear suspension has been dialed in to produce a nearly neutral handling front-wheel drive car. Indeed,
that's all really positive. I mean, really, the acceleration's pretty good. 8.3 seconds using a 5-speed, 0.3 of a second off of what the 4-speed automatic had before. Personally, I know heresy, I'd rather have the automatic, honestly, and I wouldn't have this as a two-door. I mean, it's not a sports car, so I think you know how I feel about two-doors, but it just makes everything more difficult. But really solid numbers, pretty good. Not outstanding, not a sports car, but a little pep to it. But for them to take this platform that, honestly, again, looking back in history, I didn't have a lot of respect for it, and how it sat, the boat-like seating of it. Nice neutral handling, a lot of really positive things here. The shifter's a little rubbery. Well, gosh, I think we've heard that about pretty much every car that isn't a Japanese car for decades. So that just doesn't surprise me.
It's not until pushed in our emergency lane change exercise that the Alero demonstrates the cornering push associated with having so much hardware over the front wheels. The speed-sensitive rack and pinion steering delivers quick and precise turn-ins with a moderate amount of feedback. Anti-roll bars at front and rear keep the body roll in check, although our testers noted feeling tossed around during side-to-side transitions. But unless you're cutting cones in a construction zone, that won't be a problem when you're in touring mode. The Alero's compliant suspension and 107-inch wheelbase readily soak up the imperfections associated with back-road transit. And while the interstate ride is slightly choppy, it's not annoying. Enhancing the driving reverie is a comfortable, ergonomically well-done cabin.
So before we move on and let them talk about it anymore, I kind of like it. I kind of like the style of it. I kind of dig, I don't know what to say. I kind of dig a lot about it. I really do. I kind of like the center area here with the radio and the climate controls underneath. Nice big knobs, well labeled. It's all plastic. It's plastic on plastic with different shades of plastic, it looks like. But there's a lot of cuts in this. Honestly, I can't shake the feeling that this looks like GM took a mid-90s Ford Dash and just kind of improved it a little bit. It's not bad. It's not hideous. And as I recall, in person, the materials were pretty nice. For the time, they were pretty nice. I think it's very handsome. It's just a little cut up. I guess I got to give it some credit for being 2000, 22 years old now.
And the fact you can get the 5-speed in both sedan and coupe. Our GL Coupe tester came with Kona cloth upholstery covering the supportive front buckets. It also came with the optional 6-way power front seat for the driver that faces a standard tilting steering wheel. The leather wrapping comes courtesy of an option package and an easily read cluster of gauges. Our Alero came with the optional 100-watt dynamic bass audio system with an auto-reverse cassette deck, CD player, and 6-speaker layout. It's well worth the extra $350. It, along with the logically placed climate controls underneath, features simple, easy-to-operate controls. Several of the staff 6-footers remarked on the Alero's roominess up front, and some of that roominess carries over into the coupe's rear as well. There you'll find nearly the same room as offered by the Alero sedan, while behind the split...
Okay, and that's almost the same space as what they have in the sedan. That was pretty tight, let's face it. That was not a lot of room there in front of that guy's knees, so that's pretty tight.
Folding seat backs, you'll find a most generous 14.6 cubic feet of grocery hauling trunk space. You won't need a whole lot more space than that when it comes to hauling the Alero to a stop. We average stops from 60 in a scant 110 feet, with the front and rear disc four-wheel ABS system getting high marks in pedal feel and stability. Base price on our Alero GL tester is $18,185. Throw in a couple of options and we're out the door for a still modest $19,850. A slightly cheaper GX model is available, and so is a top-of-the-line GLS. With the addition of the 5-speed manual transmission, our wish for a more sporting Alero came true. And while we're trying not to let our hardly paranormal success go to our heads, we'll be channeling thoughts of a fire-breathing Alero with a twin-turbo V6 and close-ratio 6-speed tranny towards the Oldsmobile HQ. Fellow disciples are welcome to join in.
Wow. So again, putting this in the perspective of, I just did that history of Oldsmobile. I've taken this major trip down memory lane for myself of my family having had a couple of Oldsmobiles, and they were all very reliable. And in the 90s and the 2000s, I really liked Oldsmobile. They were too much of a stretch. I couldn't afford them at the time, but I really liked them. I came dangerously close to buying an Achieva, and I really like the Alero, and I like the Aurora. This was surprisingly positive. I mean, remembering that this is when the division was being announced that it was going to be closed down, and that 4 years later an Alero was the last car to roll off an Oldsmobile assembly line. That was surprisingly positive. The engine was competitive, it made good power, it handled well, it braked well, the seats were comfortable, the dash was fine, it was pretty good looking. I like the look of it. They had high marks for the ergonomics, the big buttons. Oldsmobile, and yes, GM had learned from the Japanese. And, you know, simple things like the simple button to move the seat, not scattering it, 3 different chrome buttons, right? Did you notice how easy it was for him to adjust the steering wheel, just to flip and adjust it? Big knob for the HVAC, big buttons for that radio. I mean, big gauges. They said all they had to say about it was they were clear. This is a well put together car. And it's just so sad to me to know that this was the end, because there was nothing negative in that review. Now, they skipped over a lot. I think that trunk sounded a little small, 14 some odd cubic feet. They didn't talk about the lift over. Be interested to have had a little feedback on that. I really would like to see a 4-door review with an automatic. But I'm going to tell you, for that $18,000-ish, I would buy one of these today. Absolutely. That is exactly what I think I would like to tootle around in and enjoy. But of course I can't. 22-year-old car is not sold, and the whole division hasn't been around for, 18 years. But really, really positive. And I've got to say, I think the color's sexy. I think the body's sexy. I like the rear end of it. I like almost everything about this car. And I'll close with knowing that Oldsmobile sales were tanking, and they only sold about, I think, 400,000 if I remember correctly, this year. It would be fascinating to see. I might go look this up on Car and Driver or something like that. See a comparison of where the Alero compared with a Ford, a Honda, and a Toyota at the time, because that was very positive. So thanks for this trip down memory lane, guys. Let me know if you have any memories of this, or if you just think I'm way off base about the car, the dash, or the motor, whatever it happened to be. But I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me.